"Mr. Buffett gave my daughter her future back," cried a grateful Nebraska mother after the billionaire personally funded a statewide after-school coding program that had been axed by President Trump's federal education budget cuts, igniting a fierce national debate on public versus private responsibility. The video, captured on a local news reporter's phone, wasn't polished. It was shaky, raw, and utterly compelling. The mother, Corinne Vance, wasn't speaking to a crowd. She was speaking through tears of relief, her hand clutching the arm of her 12-year-old daughter, Ilara. Within an hour, the clip escaped the gravity of Omaha local news and entered national orbit. It wasn't just shared, it was championed. Cable news channels immediately split their screens. On one side, Corinne's tearful face. On the other, a file photo of a resolute President Trump. The chyron on one network read, "Billionaire's gift versus President's budget," while another asked, "Who should fund America's future?" The clip became a flashpoint, a simple human story that cut through the dense fog of policy and laid the moral stakes bare for the entire country to see. A week earlier, the decision that led to Corinne Vance's tears was signed into law with a flourish. Inside the Oval Office, President Donald Trump sat behind the resolute desk, surrounded by a phalanx of his most loyal cabinet members and congressional allies. Before him lay the Fiscal Responsibility and Patriotism Act, a sweeping omnibus bill that redefined the federal government's spending priorities. It was the centerpiece of his second-term domestic agenda, a document he hailed as the final draining of the swamp. With cameras flashing, he picked up a thick, gold-plated pen. "They said it couldn't be done," he announced to the room, his voice booming with satisfaction. "For decades, Washington has been a leaky faucet, dripping away your hard-earned money on wasteful, pointless, and frankly, un-American programs. Today, we turn off the spigot." He made a show of looking over the final page. "Billions saved. Billions. We're cutting the fat. No more federal funding for interpretive dance in Oregon. No more studies on the social habits of squirrels in California. And no more handouts for local pet projects that should be paid for by states, or not at all." His supporters applauded vigorously. He looked directly into the camera lens. "This is about putting America first. Your money should be rebuilding our country, not funding some kid's basket weaving class. We are making our government lean, strong, and accountable." He signed his name with a jagged, forceful signature. To him, the bill was a masterpiece of efficiency, a necessary amputation of gangrenous federal overreach. He had no knowledge of, nor interest in, a small line item buried on page 847, section 12, which formally deauthorized federal grant matching for non-essential STEM enrichment programs. To him, it was just one of thousands of cuts. It was fat. It was waste. It was gone. Hundreds of miles away, in Omaha, Nebraska, Warren Buffett's morning routine was unchanged. At his desk in the Kiewit Plaza, a building he has occupied for over 60 years, he was not watching the grand ceremony from Washington. He was reading the paper. Not the Wall Street Journal. Not yet. He always started with the local Omaha World Herald. As he ate his modest McDonald's breakfast, his eyes scanned past the national headlines and settled on a smaller story, tucked away in the metro section. The headline was simple: "Statewide after-school program Nebraska Futures to close following federal cuts." The article detailed how the program, which provided free after-school instruction in computer coding, robotics, and basic engineering to over 5,000 middle schoolers across the state, was shutting down. Its operational budget relied on a federal grant that matched, dollar for dollar, the funds raised from local businesses. With the federal money gone, the entire program was insolvent. The reporter had interviewed a local parent, a single mother named Corinne Vance. "My daughter, Ilara. She lives for this program," Vance was quoted as saying. "She wants to be a software engineer. This was her only chance to learn. I don't know what I'm going to tell her." Buffett read the quote twice. He put the paper down. The methodical, unhurried calm of his morning had been punctured. He saw the situation not through a political lens of federal budgets and fiscal responsibility. but through the clear, simple lens of a value investor. To him, this wasn't a saving. It was the destruction of an asset. It was canceling a high-yield investment before it had a chance to mature. He saw 5,000 kids, brimming with potential, being told their future wasn't worth a rounding error in a federal budget. He took a sip of his Coca-Cola. He didn't get angry. He got to work. He picked up his old flip phone and made his first call. "Deb," he said to his longtime assistant, "get me the head of the Buffett Foundation and find a number for the director of a program called Nebraska Futures." That first call set in motion a quiet, efficient cascade of action. Within hours, Buffett was on the phone with Alastair Finch, the harried and heartbroken director of the now-defunct Nebraska Futures program. Finch, expecting a call of condolence from a local dignitary, was stunned to hear Buffett's voice on the line. "Mr. Finch," Buffett began, his tone more like that of a friendly neighbor than a billionaire tycoon, "I read about your program in the paper. It sounds like a fine operation." Finch, flustered, explained the mechanics of the funding, the passion of his instructors, and the devastation of the closure. He spoke of the kids from farming towns and inner-city neighborhoods who were discovering a talent they never knew they had. He spoke of Alara Vance. "She's one of our stars," Finch said, his voice thick with emotion. "That girl is building apps on her own time. She has a gift." Buffett listened patiently, asking a few simple questions. "What was the total federal grant you lost? How much do you need to operate for, say, the next 5 years? Are the facilities still available?" Finch answered, his hopes beginning to flicker. By the end of the 30-minute call, the deal was done. The Buffett Foundation would cover the entire shortfall, not just for 1 year, but with a 5-year commitment, along with an additional grant to upgrade the program's aging computers. It was done without press releases, without fanfare, without a single political demand. Buffett's only request was that they get the program running again as quickly as possible. "These kids have waited long enough," he'd said before hanging up. The press conference was Alastair Finch's idea. He felt a simple announcement wasn't enough. The community needed to see what had been saved. He chose the North Omaha Community Center, one of the program's largest venues. The building was old but clean, the walls now decorated with brightly colored posters of circuit boards and binary code. In the adjoining room, visible through a large glass window, a Nebraska Futures class was already in session. A dozen children, Alara Vance among them, sat in front of brand new monitors, their faces illuminated by the glow of the screens. A teacher guiding them through a line of Python code. The site was a perfect, living backdrop. The press corps was a mix of Omaha's local affiliates and a few national correspondents who had been tipped off that Buffett himself might make a rare public appearance. They set up their cameras, expecting a standard feel-good story about local philanthropy. Alastair Finch spoke first, his voice trembling with gratitude as he thanked the Buffett Foundation for its unbelievable act of faith in our children. Then, he introduced Corrine Vance. Corrine had never spoken into a microphone in her life. She clutched a crumpled piece of paper in her hand, but she never looked at it. She looked instead toward the window, at her daughter. "When I got the call that the program was closing, it felt like a door was slammed shut," she started, her voice quiet. "Not just on a building, but on my daughter's dreams. We don't have a lot. That program was everything. It was a place she felt smart and safe and seen." Her eyes welled up. And then, a few days later, Mr. Finch called back. He told me it was all coming back. Because one person, one good person, decided our kids were worth it. She looked out at the reporters, her voice cracking with emotion. That's when she said it, the line that would echo across the country. "Mr. Buffett gave my daughter her future back." A wave of camera shutters clicked. Then, Warren Buffett stepped up to the modest podium. He wore a simple suit and a friendly, slightly rumpled grin. He didn't look like a financial titan or a political player. He looked like a grandfather who was proud of his community. He adjusted the microphone. "Thank you, Corinne. And thank you, Mr. Finch," he began, his voice calm and steady. "I'm not much for speeches. The real work is being done right there, in that room." He gestured toward the classroom, where Alara and her classmates were now engrossed in their work, oblivious to the media spectacle. "A while back I read a story about a farmer. He had two choices. He could sell his seed corn for a quick profit today, or he could plant it and guarantee a harvest for years to come. It's not a very complicated decision, is it?" He smiled. "When you look at these children, you're looking at the best seed corn this country has. You're looking at the next generation of innovators, doctors, engineers, and entrepreneurs. Investing in them isn't an expense. It's the highest yield investment you can possibly make." He was about to step away when a hand shot up from the back. It was a reporter from a major cable news network, her expression sharp and confrontational. "Mr. Buffett," she called out, her voice cutting through the room's warm atmosphere. "We just received a push notification from the White House. A statement from the President's press secretary. I'll quote it for you." She held up her phone. "It calls your donation a patronizing publicity stunt and a deliberate attempt to undermine the President's necessary fiscal agenda. It suggests you should be focusing on your shareholders, not playing politics with education. What is your response to the White House?" A hush fell over the room. The local story had just collided head-on with national power. Every camera swiveled to Buffett. Corinne Vance tensed, her hand instinctively finding her daughter's shoulder through the glass. Buffett's smile didn't vanish, but it tightened almost imperceptibly at the corners. He paused for a long moment, a silence that felt heavier than any speech. He looked at the reporter, then his gaze drifted past her, toward the window where Alara Vance was now explaining a piece of code to the boy sitting next to her, her face alive with understanding and confidence. He then turned back to the reporter. "Well," he said, his voice dropping to a folksy, disarming tone, "I don't follow Washington's day-to-day chatter very closely." He let that sink in for a second. "But I've been in business for a while, and I can tell you that the best investment anyone can make is in the next generation. It isn't politics. It's just good business." He gave a small, knowing smile. "The returns are priceless." The words hung in the air, simple, direct, and devastatingly effective. For a brief second, the ravenous press corps was silenced. They had come expecting a fight, a political brawl between a president and a billionaire. They had prepared for complex financial justifications or angry denials. Instead, Buffett had reframed the entire debate with the unimpeachable logic of a parable. He had not attacked the president. He had simply rendered his attack irrelevant. The silence was broken by a cacophony of shouted questions. "Mr. Buffett, does that mean you believe the president is short-sighted? Are you planning more initiatives like this? Is this the start of a new political crusade for you?" Buffett ignored them all. He gave a final, small, polite nod to the room, a gesture that clearly signaled the end of the discussion. He then turned his back on the cameras and the frantic reporters. He walked over to the large window separating him from the classroom. Corinne Vance watched him approach, her anxiety melting away as he drew near. He didn't speak to her at first. He simply leaned down slightly, his eyes twinkling, and spoke directly to her daughter through the glass. "Ilara," he said, his voice easily audible to Corinne, "I saw the application you were designing on the screen there. Looks like a winner." Ilara's eyes went wide. She looked from the famous billionaire to her mother and back again, a blush creeping up her neck. She managed a small, shy nod. Buffett smiled. "Keep at it," he said. "Don't let anyone tell you you can't build something wonderful." He then straightened up, gave Corinne a warm, reassuring look that needed no words, and walked quietly out a side door, leaving the media to feast on the scraps he had left them. His exit was as powerful as his statement. The noise of politics was a distraction. The real value was in the quiet room with the children. The firestorm erupted before Buffett's car had even left the community center's parking lot. The clip of his response, calm, folksy, and utterly defiant, became the digital equivalent of a wildfire. It was spliced, subtitled, and memeified within minutes. On one side of the political spectrum, it was hailed as a moment of profound moral clarity. Hashtags like #PricelessReturns and #TheOmahaWay trended for days. Pundits lauded Buffett as an American sage, a throwback to an era when civic duty trumped political warfare. One liberal commentator declared, "Today, Warren Buffett taught a masterclass in patriotism, reminding us that a nation's balance sheet is not measured in dollars saved but in futures secured." Images of Buffett smiling next to Ilara's classroom were juxtaposed with screen captures of President Trump's angry-looking file photos. The narrative was one of quiet wisdom versus loud bluster. On the other side, the reaction was equally swift and far more vitriolic. Pro-Trump media outlets framed the event as a calculated attack by a globalist billionaire who embodied the very swamp the president was elected to drain. "Buffett's stunt, an insult to hard-working taxpayers," screamed one headline. "The Oracle of Omaha thinks his pocketbook is bigger than your vote," a popular conservative podcaster raged. "He's using feel-good photo ops to undermine a duly elected president who is finally trying to stop the endless bleeding of your money to ungrateful communities." The White House, seeing the public relations battle slipping away, doubled down. The press secretary held an emergency briefing, accusing Buffett of weaponizing philanthropy for political gain. Then, as expected, the president himself weighed in from his social media platform. A torrent of posts appeared late into the night. "Sleepy Warren Buffett, who was friends with crooked Hillary and all the rest, thinks he can tell me how to run the economy. Sad," read the first. Then another followed minutes later. "The fake news is fawning over Buffett for giving away what is pocket change to him. I am saving trillions for the American people. He is giving away your shareholder money to look good, while I am fighting for you. Who is the real hero?" He ended with a direct threat. "Maybe we should have the IRS take a good long look at how these foundations are being used by billionaires to avoid taxes and play politics. It would be a shame." The battle lines were no longer just drawn, they were fortified trenches in a full-blown culture war. While the world debated his motives, Warren Buffett was at home, in the same modest house in Dundee he'd owned for decades. The victory the world saw on television felt very different within those walls. The quiet satisfaction of solving a problem was being drowned out by the incessant, ugly noise of the blowback. The phone rang constantly. His assistant, Deb, had filtered the calls, but the sheer volume was a presence in the house. She had given him the afternoon briefing just an hour before. Support was pouring in, yes, but so was the hate. Vile, anonymous emails. Unsettling messages left on the office voicemail. A handful of credible threats were being monitored by a private security detail he never wanted, but now reluctantly accepted. He was 94 years old. He had built an empire on patience and logic, insulating himself from the manic whims of the market and the fleeting passions of politics. Now, the chaos he had so skillfully avoided his entire life was being beamed directly into his living room. That evening, his daughter, Susie, came over. She found him in his study, not reading annual reports, but staring blankly at a television screen showing two pundits screaming at each other about him. She quietly turned it off. "Dad," she said, her voice gentle but laced with worry. "Are you okay?" He turned, his face etched with a weariness she hadn't seen in a long time. "I'm fine, Susie. Just noisy is all." "It's more than noisy," she countered, sitting in the chair opposite him. "The things they're saying. The president's posts. Dad, was it worth it? You've picked a fight with the most powerful man in the world. You've made yourself his enemy." He leaned back in his chair, the leather groaning softly. He looked at a framed photo on his desk of his late wife, Susan. "Your mother always said you do what's right, and you don't worry about the rest," he said, his voice raspy. "But the rest has gotten a lot louder over the years." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I read about that little girl, Ilara, and her mother, and I saw a problem. A simple one. An asset was being squandered, so I fixed it. That's all." It's what I've done my whole life. I find undervalued assets, and I invest in them. That girl, and the 5,000 others like her, they're the most undervalued asset in the country." He sighed, a deep, heavy sound. "Was it worth it? I don't know yet, but the price of doing the right thing goes up every year, Susie. It doesn't mean you stop paying it. It just means you have to be more certain you're right." The cost was not his alone. In her small rented house across town, Corinne Vance was also reeling. Her life had been turned upside down in the span of a day. Her phone buzzed with calls from producers at Good Morning America, The Today Show, and every major cable network, all wanting to fly her and Alara to New York for an exclusive interview. Local reporters were camped out on her street. But for every supportive message, there was a venomous one. Her social media was flooded with comments from strangers calling her a crisis actor, a welfare grifter, and a pawn for the liberal elite. One message read, "You should be ashamed, using your kid to get a handout from a billionaire so you don't have to work." Corinne sat at her kitchen table late at night, long after Alara was asleep, scrolling through the comments with a sick feeling in her stomach. She had spoken up out of gratitude and a desire to see good acknowledged. She had never imagined it would invite such poison into her home. She looked at the closed door to Alara's room and felt a surge of protective fear. Had she exposed her daughter to this? Was this fame, this sudden, glaring spotlight, a gift or a curse? For a moment, she wished she could take it all back, that she had just sent a private thank you note and remained anonymous. For 2 weeks, the debate raged along these predictable, entrenched battle lines. The country seemed cleaved in two, with no one willing to cross the divide. Then, the unexpected happened. The support for Buffett came from a voice no one could have predicted. Jedediah "Jed" Stone was the host of The Stone Truth, a fiercely conservative radio show that reached millions of listeners across the heartland every afternoon. Jed was a staunch Trump supporter, a man who had built his career on celebrating fiscal responsibility and excoriating what he called liberal elite hypocrisy. His listeners expected him to spend his show amplifying the president's attacks on Buffett. He started his broadcast that Tuesday just as they expected. "Folks, the president is 100% right to be auditing every single dime the federal government spends," Jed began, his gravelly voice a familiar comfort to his audience. "We have been bled dry by wasteful programs for too long. Fiscal conservatism is not a suggestion, it is a moral imperative." He paused, and his listeners leaned closer to their radios, anticipating the takedown of Buffett. But it never came. "But I want to tell you something," Jed continued, his tone shifting from combative to reflective. "Fiscal conservatism is about responsibility. It's about being a good steward. It's not about pulling up the ladder behind you. It's not about kneecapping the next generation just to make a number on a spreadsheet look better." The energy in his voice changed. "I've been watching this whole thing with Warren Buffett in Nebraska, and let me be clear, I don't agree with that man on much. His politics are not my politics. But what he did in Omaha, that wasn't about undermining the president. I don't believe it for a second." Another pause, longer this time. "That was an American looking after his own community. That was a man seeing a field that needed planting and buying the seed himself instead of complaining about the weather. That, folks, that was stewardship. And if we as conservatives forget the value of stewardship, of investing in our own communities and our own children, then we've lost the plot entirely." The silence in the radio studio was profound. Jed Stone had just thrown a grenade into the middle of his own camp, and in doing so he had completely changed the nature of the war. Jed Stone's words landed like a depth charge in the turbulent waters of the national conversation. His own switchboards lit up with a deluge of calls, his listeners sharply divided. Many were furious, accusing him of betraying the president. "You've gone soft, Jed. Buffett is the enemy," one irate caller yelled on the air. But for every angry voice, another was thoughtful, even grateful. "I'm a conservative, Jed, and I've been uneasy about this," a woman from Ohio admitted. "My town lost a program just like that one. You're right. Being conservative shouldn't mean we let our own towns fall apart." The effect was immediate and profound. Jed Stone had given a massive segment of the population Those who supported the president's fiscal goals but were troubled by the human cost the language and permission to hold two conflicting ideas at once. Other conservative voices, sensing the shift, began to soften their own rhetoric. The debate morphed from a simple partisan slugfest into a more complex, nuanced discussion about the very definition of American conservatism. The White House, suddenly finding one of its key media allies on the other side of the argument, was wrong-footed. The president's social media account, which had been a fire hose of anti-Buffett sentiment, went conspicuously silent on the topic. The momentum of the outrage campaign had been broken. A week later, with the public debate now simmering at a more thoughtful pace, Warren Buffett agreed to a single, definitive interview. He chose a veteran journalist known for her meticulous research and lack of political bias. The interview wasn't held in a television studio, but in the quiet, sunlit atrium of the Omaha Public Library. The setting was his choice. Another quiet message. He appeared relaxed, the weariness of the previous weeks replaced by a familiar, steady calm. The journalist began by asking him directly if his donation had been a political act. "Politics is about the next election," Buffett replied, his voice even. "Investing is about the next generation. What happened at the community center wasn't about one president or one budget. It was about a trend I've seen for a long time in this country. We've become very good at calculating the price of everything and very poor at understanding the value of anything." He explained his philosophy in the simplest terms. He described America as a magnificent farm he had been lucky enough to be born in. "This soil has been tilled and fertilized by generations before me," he said. "They invested in education, in infrastructure, in a system of laws that allowed someone like me to prosper. The fruits I've enjoyed didn't come from my genius alone. They grew from the soil of American opportunity. To not put something back into that soil for the next crop of youngsters would be more than selfish. It would be a betrayal of the very system that created you." The journalist pressed him on the president's accusations. Buffett simply waved a hand dismissively. "That's short-term noise. The real issue is the same in both political parties. We celebrate leaders who cut a ribbon on a new bridge, but we fire the maintenance crews who stop it from collapsing 20 years later. We applaud the quarterly earnings report, but we ignore the long-term investment in research and development that will guarantee the company is still here in 50 years. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "It's all about compound interest. Everybody understands it with money, but they forget it applies to everything else. Education compounds. Kindness compounds. A small investment in a child's future can pay dividends that transform a family for 100 years. When you defund a program like Nebraska Futures, you're not just saving a few $1,000,000 today. You are wiping out trillions of dollars in potential future earnings, innovation, and human happiness. It is, by any sensible measure, the worst financial deal you could possibly make." His final message was clear, rising above the political fray. "My fortune is not really mine," he concluded. "It's a claim check on the future output of American society. My only job is to reinvest it as wisely as possible, and I can think of no wiser investment than the 5,000 children in Nebraska who just got their shot at the future back." The interview marked the end of the public saga. The news cycle, as it always does, moved on, but the idea Buffett had championed, the principle of stewardship, had taken root. 3 weeks later, in a bustling suburb of Houston, Texas, a woman named Brenda Martinez was wiping down the counter at her diner, the Lone Star Grill. Brenda was a lifelong conservative, a small business owner, and a regular listener of Jed Stone's radio show. She had initially been firmly in the president's camp, angered by what she saw as another elite telling her what to think. But Jed's words, followed by Buffett's library interview, had stuck with her. That week, she read in her local paper that the town library, a place her own children had used constantly, was cutting its weekend hours due to a shortfall in the municipal budget. The parallels were unavoidable. Brenda didn't have a billion-dollar foundation. She had 3 diners, a loyal customer base, and a deep love for her community. The next day, she printed new signs and placed them in the windows of all her locations. They read, "Dine out for books." This Saturday, 20% of all sales will be donated to the Westbury Park Library to keep it open on weekends. When a reporter from the local paper came to ask her why she was doing it, Brenda, a pragmatic woman not given to grand speeches, simply shrugged. "This town's been good to my family, and good to my business," she said, unknowingly echoing a sentiment from 1,000 miles away. The library is part of that. It's a good investment. You gotta plant some seeds if you want anything to grow. The story ran on page 3 of the local section. A small act of civic kindness that would never make the national news, but was, in its own way, a priceless return. Who do you think is ultimately responsible for investing in the next generation? The government? Private citizens? Or a partnership of both? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that go beyond the headlines.